These are some key activities to be done as an establishment of the community management system in the case of drinking water service delivery. And the annual operations that needs to be done are, one is water budgeting and financial budgeting, the budgeting part of it. So in water budgeting, we are looking at the sources of water, maybe surface water, rainwater harvesting, groundwater, and so on, and how they will be spent in the villages, how they will be used for agriculture, industry, as well as drinking water. And therefore, how do you rationalize the available water among the different users? And also the village water and sanitation committee. Sorry. Village water and sanitation committee should also have a financial budgeting, which is basically the revenue that is expected to be collected, as well as the cost estimated for the year. And of course, then the actual operation of the system starts. There may be certain maintenance and repairs, and conducting meetings of the VWSC, and sometimes with Gram Sabha, in order to take certain major decisions. Decisions such as user charge determination, decisions such as, of course, the billing and collection is operational issue, as well as managing finance. So therefore, one of the key decisions that needs to be taken is user charge determination. So in the financial budgeting, so you need to look at the resources to meet the cost. So this may partly come from the government sources, for example, the funding for the infrastructure itself, and community would also contribute 10% as mentioned in the Jal Jeevan Mission guidelines. And center and state may also support O&M, like the 15th Finance Commission grants and so on. And of course, most important one is the user charge collection from each households. So, therefore, determining the user charge is an important activity that the VWSC will have to do. So, therefore, the question is, what is the optimal user charge that you can levy on the households, so that there is a financial sustainability, as well as there is a buy-in by the households. So that's important from the viewpoint of the financial sustainability, and regular collection of the user charges will ensure the efficiency in the water delivery system. So in any public infrastructure development world over, you will see that there is a user charge collection. Even now we can see the highways and so on, the toll being collected, for of course to recover the investment that is made and so on. And that is true for transportation system, drinking water system and so on. And it's there world over. So in many cases, though the full cost recovery, of course, may help in ensuring timely repair and maintenance, as well as replacement can be done when needed. At the very least, such projects envisage covering the operations and maintenance expenses. So the user charge at least cover the operation and maintenance expenses, but it is good if it can, in the full cost can be actually recovered, so that repair, maintenance, as well as replacement is easier, or as and when needed, it can be done. without going through a long process of, let's say, applying to the government for grant and waiting for that. So therefore, efficient pricing approach is necessary to achieve a balance between water supply and water demand. And I will talk about it, what I mean by achieving the balance between the supply and demand. Cost recovery through user charges can also improve water allocation, because when we start looking at the costs of supplying water, then we will be also looking at where all the water is going and how do we rationalize in order to make sure that you can keep the cost low. As well as it will encourage conservation, so you will not waste water. And water pricing can influence water use efficiency at both individual level as well as community level. So therefore, at the individual level, when you are paying for it, then you will use it more judiciously. And that will also be at the community level, because at the community level, you are looking at balancing the budget. So the need for pricing, so one can think of government actually meeting these costs, or government running the system, which of course we can see some examples in the previous projects and so on. But invariably, these government run systems have high cost, because there are layers of people looking after supervising and actual operation and so on. And therefore, the cost will be high, as well as often it is inefficient, because it may not meet the needs of the people. So you cannot fine tune the system according to the needs of the people. So that it's because of these reasons, JJM advocates for communities and local governments to be involved in the process of implementation and take over the operational and maintenance of the maintenance function. So the JJM envisages, therefore, involvement of community from the very beginning, as I mentioned earlier, contributing 10% of the investment cost of the project and providing input on infrastructure and construction. So this approach would address concerns about the functionality of the system and make it work efficiently to meet the essential drinking water needs. So therefore, in order to make sure that the drinking water system works well, efficiently, as well as sustainably, it is important that the community is involved, and community takes ownership, community starts participating in management of it, and community takes over the operations and maintenance. So then the question is, how should the let's say management, which is VWSC, determine the price or the user charges? So it is same as determining water charges in any marketplace for any product and so on. So in the market, you see different market structures like competitive markets, or sometimes you see monopoly and monopsony. In a competitive market, we know that the prices determined by the supply and demand, aggregate supply and demand, and which actually eliminates the any deadweight loss that is there. Whereas in other market structure, other than the competitive market, such as monopoly and monopsony, the price determined is either by the buyer or seller, and they try to maximize profit, and therefore they are not in line with the welfare maximization. If you look at the piped drinking water supply system, by the very nature, the network of pipes and so on can create local monopolies, because the entity which is actually supplying water or looking after this network and so on can become a monopoly, and therefore they can start charging the monopoly prices. So So therefore, this would be higher than the price that one could have for a social welfare maximization. So therefore, it is always advocated to run the drinking water system on a no profit, no loss basis, and not by private players. So therefore, in most places you would see that the drinking water system is run by public agencies, local governments, communities, and so on, not by the private players, because there is a possibility of making monopoly profit and charge high prices, and therefore this is not advisable, especially water being essential good for livelihood. So the question is, how do you price then, the water? So this, of course, as I just mentioned, it is like deciding prices in any marketplace. One can also use the pricing principles such as cost-based pricing, or competition-based pricing, or value-based pricing. So broadly, these different pricing approaches are based on the supply, demand, and market competition. So let me just briefly talk about what do I mean by supply, demand, and market competition. And then, we can relate that to these principles of cost-based, competition-based, and value-based pricing. So as far as the demand is concerned, we know that it is the consumer who demands the product, right? User, consumers, customers, whatever you want to call, and they actually demand the products or services. So how do they decide how much to buy? So it is determined by individuals maximizing their utility subject to that budget constraints. So this is from economic principles, essentially saying that, consumer, when they make choice decision, they will maximize their utility subject to the budget constraint. So what do we mean by that? So let's say, you have a budget of spending 500 rupees for a weekly, vegetables or fruits. So when you go to the market, so you look at the prices of these different vegetables and fruits, and the utility attached to it, usefulness attached to it, or preferences attached to it. Sometimes you may like some fruits than the others. You may like papaya than the grapes, and maybe apple than the papaya, and so on. So you may have a sequence of preferences attached to individual fruits and vegetables, which is basically indicating the usefulness of those products for the individual consumers. So, as looking at the available products, the consumers basically try to look at or maximize their usefulness by basically assessing how much they can buy each one of them, depending on the prices. So therefore, that is the process of generating demand at individual consumer level. And because of that, we would see that there, of course, in a demand relationship, we would see that as prices increase, the demand goes down, and vice versa. And we will make this a little bit more clear in the next slide. But the supply actually comes from the producers, whoever is producing, manufacturing, or agriculture, farmers, and so on. They produce the goods and services, and their aim is basically maximizing profit. So profit maximization, they would produce a quantity which actually maximizes the profit. And that is what the supply is. So profit is basically the total revenue minus total cost. And they try to maximize the profit, essentially saying that at what level of supply or production the difference between the total revenue and total cost is maximum. So it turns out that it's actually maximum when marginal revenue is equals to marginal cost. So marginal revenue is basically the the revenue that can be earned by, let's say, selling one more unit of goods and services. The marginal cost is actually cost of producing that additional unit. So wherever this marginal cost is equals to marginal revenue, that is the point at which the producer should be producing. So that is the quantity that the producer will be producing and supplying it to the marketplace. So that is what the basic foundations for supply in the marketplace. So therefore, we will look at this in a little bit greater detail in the next slide. So the other aspect of price determination is the market. So consumers, producers, let's say if you produce less, if it is available less in the market, then the prices go up. And if you demand more, the prices go up, and so on, right? So in the marketplace, you will see how the prices keeps changing depending upon the supply and demand. It can also change because of the market structure itself, as I have just mentioned earlier, that is, whether it's a competitive market or whether it is a non-competitive market such as monopoly or monopsony. So in a non-competitive market, the individuals will decide the prices. So the monopoly or the monopsony will decide the prices, and therefore it is not necessarily dependent on the supply and demand. So therefore you will see the price is not very efficient. That means it is not really reflecting the supply and demand, and therefore there will be a welfare loss in case where the markets are not competitive. So therefore, the guiding principle for us in pricing, whether it is drinking water or any other product, for social welfare maximization is basically the competitive price, or the price that can be obtained in a competitive market. So that gives us a guideline as to how we should be pricing the, let's say, drinking water. So just to give you a little bit more ideas about the demand, some of you must be already familiar with these because these are very simple economics concept. But just to give you, some of you may not have this, and therefore, and I'm just repeating it here. Essentially, when you are purchasing any product, you are looking at the utilities, and the extent to which you will purchase will always dependent on the marginal utilities compared to the prices. So as we see, if you keep buying a particular product more and more, the marginal utility goes down. So whether it's a fruits, vegetables, or anything. So if you keep buying more and more, the marginal utility, that is utility derived from additional unit of purchase, actually goes down. So therefore, you can see a downward, sloping, marginal utility as you increase the unit of, purchase. So a unit of goods purchase. So that is what you do when you are deciding to purchase a particular product or service. So then you are basically saying that whether the marginal utility that I'm gaining is equivalent to the price or not. Of course, that utility is converted into some monetary terms. For individuals will convert those satisfaction to monetary terms. It's more like saying, okay, if this film is good enough, if it is priced at 300 rupees, would I go and watch it or not? So that marginal utility is what you have, and you convert that into some kind of a monetary values. And that monetary value, you compare it with the prices and say whether the marginal utility is greater than price or less than price or equal to price. So you keep on buying that particular commodity till the marginal utility is equals to price. So that's why you will also see that the demand curve is also sloping downwards. So this is the typical demand curve that you could see in most of the commodities. We can just take an example and see how one can sort of arrive at demand curve using simple exercises. For example, in a study to find willingness to pay for drinking water supply, the following representative individuals indicated, you asked them and they indicated the maximum price they would pay per month of supply of water. Shankar is ready to pay a maximum of 50 rupees. Radha is ready to pay a maximum of 80 rupees. Kiran is ready to pay a maximum of 170 rupees, and so on. Let's say these are, this is a very small sample of representative consumers. One can always think of a large sample of, let's say, 500 people and so on, with similar willingness to pay. There are different types of, or different methods used in eliciting willingness to pay, but this is one of them. So with this data, one can actually construct a demand curve. Okay, I'll just show you how it can be done. So let's say we have two variables here. One is the price and the numbers, how many people are ready to pay. Let's say what is, the maximum of 30 rupees. It's actually one person. So we can see here, Smita is the only person who is ready to pay this 30 rupees. And if you look at 50 rupees, there are two persons, Shankar and Lisa. So there are two people are ready to pay 50 rupees. And 80 rupees, Radha and Sally. Similarly, 130 rupees, there is one person ready to pay, which is, Dheeraj. And 150 is Nagina, and 170 is Kiran. So these are the maximum price that the individuals are ready to pay, and how many are ready to pay the maximum of these prices. Now, if we think about it, at 170 rupees, if you charge 170 rupees as price, there is only one person who is going to buy it. If you charge 150 rupees, then two will buy it, because the 170% will also buy it, and therefore these two people will actually buy the water. And similarly, if at 130, there will be one more person will be buying, three will buy. And at 80 rupees, if you charge 80 rupees, then all these people will be buying. There are four people who will be buying this. Sorry, this should be five. And, at 50, there will be seven, and 30, it's eight people are ready to buy. So this is 7 and 5. So let's say if you graphically interpret this, or, if you, prepare a graph of these, basically, this is more like a demand, and this is the price. And if you put these demand and price on a graph, you can see the X and Y graph. This is the Y-axis, and this is the X-axis. So on X-axis, it is quantity, and quantity that is, the people are ready to purchase. And on Y-axis, it is price. And this is how it looks like, the demand that is obtained from this survey. So which looks, very similar to what you would see in a textbook in economics, when they draw a demand curve, which is actually like this. So one can actually, look at more systematically what is the, willingness to pay, and use them to understand the demand curve. So then similarly, one can also look at the supply curve. So we started with the producer and how the producer is able to decide how much of quantity to be produced. That's basically maximizing profit. So which is the difference between the total revenue and total cost. So total revenue, which is basically the quantity multiplied by the price. So the market price multiplied by how much you are selling is what the total revenue for individuals is. And one can actually see at different levels of quantities what will be the total revenue. And of course, there may you may see a curve connecting all those points. And actually, the slope of the total revenue curve is the marginal revenue. So, which is basically revenue generated by selling one more unit of output. And the slope of the total cost curve, which is, the total cost is basically all the inputs that are used and multiplied by their prices. So you sum it up across all inputs, and that's what will give you the total cost. And so therefore, the difference between the total cost and the total revenue is what the profit is. And one can look at where the profit is maximum. So it turns out that the profit is maximized when marginal revenue is equals to marginal cost. That means the revenue that can be earned by selling one more unit of output is equal to the cost of producing it. At that point, the producer stops production. So that is the level at which the profit will be maximized, level of production at which the profit will be maximized. So graphically, one can represent this. So one can say this is what the total cost curve is. So this is the output and this is the cost. Okay, so therefore one can see this behavior of the total cost, and one can also see the revenue by selling different levels of output at a price. And then, of course, we can see the difference between these two. Here up to here, it is loss. And then from here onwards, the revenue is greater than the cost. And therefore, you'll see up to here, the profit is positive. And so this is what the yellow line is, what the profit curve is. And we can see where the profit is maximum. So that profit maximization is here. And therefore, that's where the difference between the revenue and the cost is maximum. And at this point, it turns out that if you look at the slope of the revenue curve and the slope of the cost curve, they are equal. The slopes are equal. Okay, so at these points, the slopes are equal. So that is where the profit is maximized. So that is, the slope of the revenue curve is what the marginal cost curve is, and slope of the slope of the revenue curve is what the marginal revenue curve is, and the slope of the cost curve is the marginal cost. And when they are equal, that's the profit maximizing level of output to be produced. So similarly, one can also show it through algebraically. If you have some little familiarity with the calculus, one can say that maximize this function, which is basically you take the first derivative with respect to the quantities, which are simply just look at what is the change in profit with respect to change in quantity, then which is actually change in revenue with respect to change in quantity minus the change in cost with respect to quantity, set it equal to 0, and you get the marginal revenue is equals to marginal cost, which is essentially saying that, that is the profit maximizing level of output that the producer should be producing. So at different levels of prices, I know as you look at what should be the optimum level of supply to be, or the product to be produced, you get a relationship between the price and the quantity, and that is what is called as a supply curve. So given this supply and demand curve, the price will be determined if it is a competitive market, which is basically saying that there are a large number of buyers and sellers, and their demand and supply interact to give a price which is actually welfare maximizing. So therefore, even if it is not a competitive market, we should find out what should be the competitive market price for a given situation. And if we use that price, it is likely to be welfare maximizing price. So that is what we are trying to say in this case. That means, we have talked about, the drinking water system is unlikely to be a competitive market, unlike maybe bottled water and so on. And therefore, it is important to understand what is a competitive market's price and use that price to, come up with the user charge. So that is the basis for, that's the reason why we are discussing, the market structure, demand and supply. So as I mentioned, in a perfectly competitive market, the aggregate supply, the S is the supply curve, and the demand curve. So they interact to generate this price, and it is not in the hands of in one single individual, and these are determined by the market itself. This quantity that is to be sold and bought will also be determined by the market. So that is the invisible hand which actually determines the price in quantities rather than individuals deciding in cases of non-perfect markets. So like in monopoly and so on. So therefore, if there is the perfectly competitive market, the price determined will be used by individual firms, and they will compare the price with the cost, the cost of production. And of course, the marginal cost will always be intersecting the average cost at the minimum of the average cost. And we will see that in a competitive market, in the long run, the price will always be at the minimum of the average cost. So that means, it is a most efficient, production. The quantity that is produced and sold in the marketplace is, is done at a lowest cost. So that is the advantage of, having a perfectly competitive market. And in all cases, the governments always try to make sure that the markets are competitive. And if it cannot be made competitive, then you come up with a competitive price, what will be a competitive price in such a case, and use that price as a basis for pricing in a non-competitive situation. So these are different market structures that one can find. So competitive market always has many firms, free entry, free exit, homogeneous product. Whereas in monopoly, there is a single, there is no possibility of allowing other firms to come in because of maybe, there is a licensing or very high cost of, setup cost and so on. Only few people can, or only one person can do it, like our railways and so on, or you don't allow others to come in and so on. So then, there could be oligopoly where few firms are competing and so on. That is still may not be the, a price that is equivalent to the perfectly competitive market. And there may be even the monopolistic competition, and there mostly you'll see a differentiated product. So in all these market structure, the best one is always a perfectly competitive market. And we would like to sort of use that, price as the basis for pricing in other situations in order to maximize social welfare. So now one can look at what happens, in a competitive market compared to a monopoly market. Given a demand curve like this, we know that the demand curve, downward sloping and so on. One can actually come up with the equivalent marginal revenue curve, which is which turns out to be half of this demand curve. Then, given the marginal cost of producing this particular product, we can now say, what is a competitive price and what is a monopoly price and so on. If you leave it with monopoly, how they would price it. Whereas, if it is a perfectly competitive market, then what will be the price? So in a perfectly competitive market, you are basically setting the demand is equals to marginal cost, and that is the the PC is the price and the QC is the quantity that will be transacted. Whereas if it is a monopoly, then you will charge or you will charge a price of PM, which is the point where marginal revenue is equals to marginal cost. So therefore, you can see this difference between the quantity that is transacted in the marketplace between the competitive market and the a monopoly market. So the difference is actually QC is much higher than the QM, and therefore you will see that in case there is a monopoly, the extent to which the transaction takes place is lower, and therefore if you have all monopolies, the economic growth will also be low. So the point to make here is we would like the water to be consumed, in adequate quantities, and therefore we would like to make sure that the prices are charged such a way that it is, equivalent to the competitive market price. So, having these two different systems, let's say if there's a competitive price and quantity and the monopoly pricing and quantity, we see that, there is a loss to the society to the extent of, let's say, the difference between the, this QC and QM. And this is what is called as a, welfare loss, which is loss to the producers and consumers. So that is what is called as a deadweight loss. So because of the market structure other than the competitive structure, we see that there is a deadweight loss in the economy. So that is, we want to avoid that kind of a deadweight loss, especially in the case of, drinking water system. And therefore, we would like to understand what would be the, competitive market price, and can we come up with, a price closer to the competitive market price in order to, come up with a user charge in the case of drinking water, delivery system. So that is the basis for, arriving at user charges, and we will continue our discussion on this in terms of, what are the pricing principles and how one can actually arrive at that, taking some examples in the tomorrow's session. But just to summarize, what we have discussed so far, one, the thing that we said, about the, sustainability of drinking water system is, we said that, the community ownership is very important, and they actually take charge of the operations and maintenance of the system. And a part of that is basically financial management. Financial management needs to be efficient in order to make the system efficient. And therefore, we need to understand how one can actually generate revenue and how do we manage the cost efficiently. And that is what we are going to talk about in this particular program. And we also said that the user charge determination is an important component of the financial management. And we need to really think about how to arrive at this user charge determination. And even if one uses a cost-based approach, we need to really look at the market structure and competitive pricing as the basis for charging the, or coming up with the user charges. So that is something we need to keep in mind. And of course, the competitive market gives us the welfare maximizing price levels, and make use of that. So I will stop at this, and there may be some questions from your side. Let's try to take those questions and see how we can understand this better.
So we have a question from Mavuduru Manoj Kumar.
Yeah.
He is asking that are there any good community-based O&M model where one can see, and how can we take LCA into O&M calculation?
Yeah, of course, we did 5 case studies from Odisha. These are in actually remote places in Ganjam district. And because of the efforts of Gram Vikas, we see that, they are working quite well. They are able to collect their user charges, they are able to determine the user charges, and they are able to manage the system quite well. So some of these, could become a model community managed, drinking water delivery systems.
Yes, sir. We have another question from Dr.
What was the
Dharmendra
second
Kumar.
part? Sorry, Prerna.
Yeah, it was how can we take LCA into O&M calculation? I'm not sure what is LCA.
We can discuss that in the next session, because we will be taking an example and then
Life cycle cost, is he saying?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. The next question is from Dr. Dharmendra Kumawat. He's asking what market size we will assume.
The market size is basically the village, the habitation. So the system that is catering to a particular habitation, or of course it could be if they are close by, maybe 2 habitations and so on. The delivery system that has been established with the help of an OHT and the system of network of pipelines. So that's what we need to consider. The number of households in the habitation is what we need to consider.
So we also have a comment from Dr. Dharmendra Kumawat.
Yeah.
He's saying that basic issue of ensuring long-term sustainability through regulations between community and market opportunities, because Kenya, Portugal, and many other countries have witnessed frequently switching from market to community and ultimately failure of pricing strategies, in particular, and the disruption of services in general. This had a very heavy cost on community.
Yeah, I think that's what I sort of meant, in the sense that unless community takes charge of ownership of the system and runs the system, it's not going to be welfare maximizing if it is run by a private system or even government, because government, as I said earlier, government costs will be much greater because of the number of people to be employed and so on, as well as they may not exactly meet the requirements of the community in terms of how much water and at what time and so on. They may not be able to meet those requirements, and therefore it could be inefficient system. So it's only the community managed system that can actually deliver the required services of a drinking water system.
Yes, so we have another question from Vivek Sharan. How the user charges from the community can be sustained to manage the operation cost?
Yeah, in most cases, what we have seen is, the operation and maintenance cost is not very high. And, actually, the communities can also, come up with ways by which you can reduce operation cost. For example, in one case study that we have seen in Odisha, where they said, well, as far as the operations is concerned, we are not going to recruit a person, but we will all take turns and do the things. So let's say, if it is switching on pumps and making sure everybody gets water and so on, maybe by turns they will do that. That's possible at the community level. Of course, not very large community, but smaller communities, these are possible, which essentially means that you don't have to recruit a person for this purpose, which means that your cost will be low. The other thing that one can also look at is something like, let's say if you have a pump that is used to, let's say, pump groundwater to the overhead tank, you can also think of an solar system, so which can reduce the operational cost to a large extent. So we have seen in some cases with a very minimal amount of operational cost, one can actually run the system. So, but if the communities are not very careful, then it's quite possible that the system that is set up is not way of high quality, like the pipelines and others, and there may be leakages. So these leakages could also contribute to higher cost. So therefore, involvement of community from the very beginning is very, very important in order to ensure that there is a quality infrastructure, and as well as, they are able to make sure that their operational cost is also low. And therefore, you can actually have a very affordable operation and maintenance cost, through an active participation of the community.
Yes, we have 5 more questions, so I will just quickly get to it. We have a question from Ruchika. In the Gram Vikas model, are the cost of direct support incorporated in the user charge? That is the cost of human resource capacity building monitoring.
No, those are not really incorporated in the operations and maintenance cost. These are separate costs. Of course, one can also think about recovering the overhead cost or the capex or the investment cost. These are generally quite large. The infrastructure cost is generally quite large, and one has to think about how to really ensure that in the long run you are able to build a fund which can actually help in replacement and repair of these infrastructure. Of course, we have seen in some cases, especially in the SVS, single village schemes, these costs are also not very high because, you may need a pump, you may need an OHT to be constructed and so on. And you, again, if you look at the, average cost, per month, per household, this may be in the range of, let's say, 80 rupees to 100 rupees in many cases. Of course, if it is sort of overcapitalized, then these costs may be high. But in many cases, you might see a reasonable cost which can be met through the user charges, in the sense that well, you can actually collect more than the operation and maintenance cost in order to build a fund which will help you to replace any equipment or repair any infrastructure, as and when required. So that's also possible, and we will talk about that in the last session. I'll show some examples and so on, and we can discuss that.
The next question is from Vivek Anand. How can diminishing marginal utility can be fined or fixed at community level?
Well, of course, one simple way to look at it is the amount of water that you are supplying. Okay. So if you see, let's say if there is an alternative water source that is available, but the quality of water is not good, then actually people may be wanting only, few liters of water per day, maybe something like a 20 liters of water per day and so on. Whereas they might use, of course, depending upon what the problem of the water of the alternative source is, they might use for many other purposes like washing, vessels and other things, maybe and the other water that is that they are using. So therefore, beyond this 20 liters, their marginal will be very low. Okay. So that is, you can say that, they will basically say, okay, I will need only this much water. If you start pricing water, they will, say that, okay, I need only this much water. Or they might even, if it is a metered situation, you will see that they will use very little water, from the tap, whereas they might be using the other water for various purposes, the not for drinking, but for other purposes. So therefore, you can find sort of marginal or a diminishing marginal value of the water, as you increase the quantity of water supply to individual households.
Yes, sir. Thank you. The next question we have is from Nitesh Kaushik. How this approach will be applicable in multi-village scheme?
Yeah, I think we will come to that in tomorrow's class. Multi-village scheme is essentially at two levels. One is the multi-village, part of it, which is basically the, water procurement, water treatment, water storage, and so on, water testing. Whereas, the in-village distribution system is basically, acquiring water or getting water from the multi-village scheme or multi-village plant, and then, distributing this among the households. So therefore, we can see that what is the cost of operating the multi-village plant, and, one can actually have a sort of a, bulk water pricing at the village level. Village buys the water from the multi-village plant at a bulk water rates, and then they would distribute the water and look at the operational cost, and then we can combine these two costs in order to come up with the pricing for the households. We will discuss that in the tomorrow's class. Tomorrow
Yes.
in the with examples.
The next question and comment is from Nanak Sant Dasani, who's from UNICEF Rajasthan. So he is saying that excellent presentation by Dr. Gopal. Yes, community engagement is the soul of the JJM, but unfortunately, community engagement is missed across the states as envisaged. Now, at post-implementation phase, VWSCs are not ready for taking up the JJM schemes. How to get it resolved?
Yeah, I guess, this is one of the major problems that we are encountering. So essentially, as you rightly said, it should have been done as a very first step and take everybody into confidence before, building infrastructure or planning for infrastructure. Some of these steps are actually missed. And now, there are bigger problems that are arising. I think it is important to make sure that there are effective communications even now, and see that people are convinced that they should be managing their system in order to really make it sustainable. So if they want adequate water of a good quality and, regularly, it's important that they will have to manage the system, and that needs to be convinced. I think effective communication is very important at this stage in order to make sure that, there is a buy-in by the communities to manage these systems.
Yes, sir. The next question is from Khatija B. Thank you, sir, for such knowledgeable session. I would like to know more how the competitive market pricing principle work effectively to determine the user charges in the community. Regards.
Yeah,
I
sure.
think
We will do that in tomorrow's class. So that's tomorrow's class is basically for that.
Then we have another question, more particularly with numbers. So Parik Shukla is asking that in our area, we developed scheme cost approx 2 crore for 30 households. So how can we consider O&M budget for this? By collecting user charges would not be enough. Please suggest, sir.
Sorry, I missed the first sentence.
Okay, sir. I will repeat. So, in our area, we developed scheme cost approximately 2 crores for 30 households. So,
Okay.
how we can consider O&M budget for this? By collecting user charges would not be enough.
Okay, we will discuss this in the subsequent sessions tomorrow, and especially day after tomorrow. We will be taking examples and working out these user charges, and then one can see whether these user charges are high, low, or one can see what needs to be done in order to make sure that the cost is recovered.
We have another question from Rajiv Rana. Sporadic supplies, low pressure, lack of community interest are some of the most noticeable drawbacks in the water supply in Bihar. What are the suggestives for Bihar context?
Yeah, it's most important thing is the product should be right. That means, if the product quality is good, people are ready to pay for it. So one of the most important point for convincing community is that there will be a regular supply of water as well as the quality is good, and that meets their requirements. If that is the case, I don't think, in most cases, of course, there will always be some outliers and so on, but in most cases people will be ready to pay for it. So fixing seals, let's say like pressure. So let's say if there is the infrastructure is not appropriately developed, then there is going to be this uneven pressure. Those who are households which are in the low lying areas will get a higher pressure, whereas the upstream ones are they are not getting enough pressure. So there are technologies which can ensure that you get an equal pressure. So for example, Karnataka has used the flow valve, which helps in making sure that there is a uniform pressure for all households. So those things will have to be put in. So those are important: regularity, adequacy, the quality. These are important criteria to make sure that the service is good. If the service is good, I'm sure people would like to have it, and they would like to even pay for it.
Yes, sir. We have one last comment. That is from Nanak Dasani from UNICEF. Thanks, sir. Yes, communication with community and convincing them is the key. I see political and bureaucratic will is also need of the hour.
Yes, I think I completely agree with you that there is bureaucracy as well as politicians should understand that in order to ensure that there is a sustainability, we should, convince the community to take ownership. That's very important. In today's situation, things are quite different, but that has to change for good of everybody, including politicians and bureaucrats.
Yes, I think that is it. We do not have any more questions or comments on the chat
Okay.
box. Yes,
So
sir.
thank you. Thanks, everybody. And
Thank you so much,
we will
sir.
come back. And tomorrow at the same time, that's 5 o'clock, we will start the session. And we will be talking about pricing principles tomorrow. And day after tomorrow, we will be talking about how to compute these costs with illustrations, with examples. Thank you very much.